Good afternoon or evening or whatever it is. First, I want to apologize about last week. I was feeling pretty terrible. I still don't feel all that great, but the show has to go on. So, what we're going to do this week is I think you probably got a good understanding of the American Revolution through the videos last week. So, I'll just kind of hit some of the highlights. And then we'll watch a video about Shays' Rebellion, and then we'll go through the highlights of the road to the Constitution. Which you should probably be exploring a little bit as you're working on your paper. Hopefully, you can turn that in on Wednesday. If you need more time, it's yours. Just ask. I just want good work. I just think it'll kind of help inform your discussion on the bulletin board, discussion board. Um, about the discussion board, thank you for everyone who's been participating. I still haven't had a chance to really look at them yet. Um, sure, they're fine as long as you talk about what you learned and ask your question. Some people have been concerned about how vague the instructions are. The reason they're vague is I want you to be able to go in your own direction and talk about what you want to talk about. And, so I'm trying to leave it up to you. Um, so anyway, what we'll talk about first is the American Revolution. We'll hit the highlights because the videos, I don't want to go through all that. So the first fighting is on Bunker Hill, really Breed Hill. There were 1,054 British casualties. The colonies were declared an open rebellion. We talked last time, we had a video about the Olive Branch Petition. On January 1776, Thomas Paine put out Common Sense, and we began to see the move toward independence. Reason I like to show you 1776 is it kind of goes through it in a theatrical way. Richard Henry Lee is the one who proposes it and gets the ball going. And ultimately, that ends with the Declaration of Independence. The British sent 35,000 soldiers and half of their navy to America and rented Hessian soldiers. Those were German mercenaries who loved to fight for a price. Patriots had to create an army from scratch. They lacked discipline. They were citizen soldiers. Native Americans will fight on both sides of the war. On July 1775, they July 1775, American forces under Richard Montgomery and Benedict Arnold attacked Canada. We have never fared well when we've attacked Canada. The army was suffering from smallpox. Montgomery was an idiot. He actually ordered an attack during a blizzard on December 31st, 1775. Montgomery was killed. 400 were taken prisoner. A counterattack by the Canadians forced a retreat. But actually, Benedict Arnold was a hero that day. He basically was able to, over the lakes, to get his people out of there. Benedict Arnold is actually a very unique kind of figure. He starts out as a hero, and obviously he's synonymous with treason now. On July 2nd, 1776, Washington barely escaped New York, where there were 427 warships and 32,000 British and mercenary troops. Washington barely mustered a force of 19,000. Washington was defeated at the Battle of Long Island, but the British did not pursue. By December 1776, the Patriot Army was near collapse. Many soldiers left. It was the stirring words from Thomas Paine that allowed many of them to stay. In December of 1776, the British General Howe decided to take up winter in New York, kind of as a vacation, I guess. On Christmas night, Washington crossed the Delaware with 2,400 troops, landed at Trenton, caught the Hessians off guard. 1 week later, he wins the Battle of Princeton, which will lead to more volunteers coming to the Army. At Princeton, there's actually a portrait of Washington that replaced a portrait of George III that had the head was blown off by a cannonball. The Army then spent early 1777 in Morrison. Many soldiers again left. There was not enough food or other supplies. Only about 1,000 stayed. Congress began offering money and land to those who would stay. In fact, where I live, just to the north of me, was actually where some of those grants were. Um, because of the smaller forces, Washington begins a strategy of hit and run. The British will occupy Philadelphia on September 11th, 1777, while Washington stayed in Valley Forge. The turning point of the war for America will be the Battle of Saratoga. Benedict Arnold will actually be very important in this. Horatio Gates was able to defeat the British in the Battle of Saratoga. Why is this important? I don't want to get into the tactics of the war. I think some of the videos did that. But what this did is it showed the French that we had a chance to win, and it led to an alliance with the French, where many foreign volunteers began to come and fight with us, including Frederick Wilhelm, the Baron von Steufen. General Lafayette from France was a big fighter. And so, and the British and the French are really the reason we win this war. We don't give them the credit they deserve. We'll get to that later. Fighting will also take place on the frontier. This will be an opportunity to break the Iroquois in the Iroquois War, and to break the Indian tribes. Daniel Boone in Kentucky will fight the Shawnee. The army again will stay at Valley Forge from 1775 to 78. This will take a toll on the troops. 2,500 will die, another 1,000 will desert. Eventually, Washington sent troops to Maryland to confiscate horses, cattle, etc., leaving IOUs. In late 1778, Henry Clinton sent forces to take Savannah. So Henry Clinton and the Americans were actually forced to surrender in Charleston. Cornwallis, the British commander, will defeat Americans at Camden. In Carolina, we actually had open fighting between patriots and loyalists. In fact, in Georgia, there were so many of them, they actually had their own regiment. There was brutality on both sides, patriots versus loyalists, because they each thought they were traitors. The heaviest fighting took place on Kings Mountain on October 7th, 1780. 700 loyalists were captured, and 25 of them were hanged. A turning point in the South will be the Francis Marion, known as the Swamp Fox. He's actually who the movie The Patriot is based on, partly anyway. Nathaniel Greene was put in charge of the South. He wins at Cowpens. And then at Guilford's Courthouse, it is a loss for the Patriots, but they inflicted heavy casualty. And they used hit and run tactics again. Now, what had happened was that the British, Cornwallis and others, decided to shift their focus south because there were more loyalists there and it was warmer. And so the ending battle will be Yorktown with a combined British force of 1,700. The French will land 6,000 in July of 1780 and will, for a short time, have superiority of the seas, keeping British reinforcements out. The weather also played a part in that. The Battle of Yorktown takes place September 28, 1781. By October 17th, Cornwallis will surrender. The Treaty of Paris will be signed on September 3rd, 1783. Now, what's interesting about Yorktown is that Washington had to be talked into it by Lafayette. He wasn't really sold on the whole idea of the war. So what does the Treaty of Paris do? It actually doubles the size of our country. It is Native Americans who really lose out on this one. We see the birth of our democracy, first under the Articles, Declaration of Independence will lead to our first governing document, the Articles of Confederation. But ultimately, we will have freedom of religion in this country. It will not be good for slaves. Actually, the British actually promised to free any slaves who fought for them So we weren't too kind for to slaves after that point. Um, so, and the real kind of interesting thing about the American Revolution is that it wasn't a sure bet. In fact, the truth of the matter is we really should have lost this sucker. But we were able to, really kind of defy the odds here. Um, and somehow become victorious, as you saw in the other videos. Um, so I'm going to kind of leave it there, other than to say women will also be excluded, much to the chagrin of people like Abigail Adams, who expected more rights. Remember, 1776, Abigail Adams and other women sewed uniforms, made gunpowder, all kinds of things. Now, Abigail Adams and John Adams, her husband, they are a very interesting couple. They shared letters, and we have those. And Abigail Adams, when asking for more rights for women, wrote her husband on March 31st, 1776, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no law or representation. So those are basically fighting words for Abigail Adams. How did her husband respond? Letter, April 14, 1776. As to your extraordinary code of laws, I cannot but laugh. We have been told that our struggle has loosened the bands of government everywhere, that children and apprentices were disobedient, that schools and colleges were grown turbulent, that Indians slighted their guardians and Negroes grew insolent to their masters. But your letter was the first intimation that another tribe, more numerous and powerful than all the rest, were grown discontented. This is rather too coarse a compliment, but you are so saucy. I won't blot it out, depend upon it. We know better than to repeal our masculine systems. So basically, John Adams' response to his wife was, shut up and go back into the kitchen. So again, keeping this one really short, just kind of the highlights. Look forward to seeing your thoughts on that with the other videos, and especially the musical 1776. Remember, you can do one of your critiques on that video. Unfortunately, it's not the movie version. Couldn't find a copy of that for free. Anyway, our next topic will be Shays' Rebellion and the road to the Constitution.